Hello everyone and welcome to SkillCapped. I'm Notorious Dub, and let's be honest, even pros with 10,000 hours in shooting games are constantly looking for things to work on and improve their aiming mechanics. So realistically, we should be doing the same exact thing, especially since we don't have it nearly as down pat as them, and it's arguably the most important thing to have in your arsenal so you have a good foundation to build upon. Which is exactly why today I'm going to be going over all of the most common mistakes and fixes that you can add into your game and routine right now to stop messing up your aim and make yourself way more consistent. I'm going to be covering everything from the mechanics you need to be implementing right now all the way to the training tips and abstract practices that the pros use to up their consistency, hit those headshots, and make yourself far faster and better at aiming. But as always, before we get too deep into the video, we have to start with our question of the day. And today I wanted to ask you guys, what is it that you think you're the best at in Valorant, or what brings you the most success at least? A lot of times it's easy to see where we're messing up, but it can be tough to realize what we're actually good at. And for me, I'd probably say it's my ability to adapt. Now, sometimes my aim is on point and sometimes I make good calls, but I feel like I have the most success consistently whenever I just zone out a little bit, let the rounds come to me, and just go with the flow of the rounds and games and just adapt to what's thrown to me. Maybe it comes down to not overthinking, which I know a ton of people, including myself, have trouble with, but even then, I'm sure you guys have way different experiences than me, which is exactly why I want to hear from you. So let me know in the comments down below. What is it that you think is your biggest strength or thing that you do best that brings you the most success in Valorant? Alright, and first and foremost, this is one thing that a ton of players have trouble with, and especially in the high ranks, this is one of those things that stops people from being able to escalate it to pro level, and even just for the people who deserve to be at a certain rank, but are too inconsistent to get over that solo queue randomness to get there. And that is not having good shot form. Now, most people don't think about aiming this way. It's all about getting to the enemy's head or body the fastest in their mind, and the faster you try to go, the faster you're going to be, right? But unfortunately, that's not actually the case. In every skill movement, whether it's sprinting, shooting a basketball, or shooting people with a mouse, proper form is going to be the skyrocket that makes everything so much faster and far more consistent because you're training that skill in an efficient movement pattern. Now, what exactly do I mean when I say having good shot form? Well, it can be broken down into three very simple parts, and the goal is to make it as concise and efficient as possible so you can replicate that movement almost to a T every time you want to. Now, first off, you have to start the movement straight to the target directly from where your crosshair initially was. And this is the most rare of the three parts to be messed up, but there are a ton of people who try to be snappy with their movement and they jerk their mouse away from the target a little bit, even if it's just a little snap away before they actually snap back towards their target. And this is the equivalent to a hitch in your shot. It happens in all skill movements. Pitchers experience this, basketball shooters experience this, and this small little jerk before you aim towards your target is one of the most surefire ways to ruin your aim consistency and speed because you're creating an inconsistent pattern that your body is always trying to correct for. And then the second part of good form is a perfectly straight line from point A, where your crosshair initially was, and point B, where your target is, which just means there should be no crescent shapes or sweeping motions up or down from point A to point B. It should be a straight line directly there, and trust me, well over half of the people who play Valorant have this problem because the sweeping motion is natural. Think about it, both your wrist and your arm move in a semicircle range of motion, and it takes your arm and wrist working perfectly together to make that a smooth straight line. And it's one of those things that aside from spending years playing FPS games consistently, you just have to focus on fixing to get rid of the problem earlier. And finally, before we talk about how to fix these, your crosshair should end perfectly on your target. This is the last part, and this is obvious, right? You always want to hit your shot, which means your crosshair should end on your target. But the reality is, a ton of people had tried to speed up their aim artificially by just going faster or doing aim training that's too difficult for their skill level at the time, which then trains you to snap to the target as fast as possible with no regard for actual accuracy. And with that, you get a few shots off, beside, or above your target before you actually correct your aim back to start hitting them. And this habit will plateau your aiming ability until the end of time or until you actually fix the problem. But now that we know what these problems are, how do we actually fix our form? Well, first and foremost, you have to remember, ingrain this in your brain. You should tell yourself every time before you train or play deathmatch that slow is accurate and accurate is fast, because developing that perfect form consistency is going to speed you up far faster than what your original ability would be. So slow your aiming motion down and focus on those perfect movements straight to your target, and over time you'll speed those shots up naturally with good habits, and you will develop that consistency that you need to stop you from top fragging one game when everything is going right to not being able to hit the broadside of a barn the next game. But remember, if you're serious about improving, then go to SkillCapped.com to unlock our hyper improvement system that will teach you how to win more gunfights, master your agent, and so much more. It's also backed by our rank improvement guarantee, so you really have nothing to lose. So come join over 500,000 satisfied members of SkillCapped, improve that KDA, and get the rank you've always wanted at SkillCapped.com. Link is in the description description below. And next up, of course, we have trusting your shot, but in two ways. One, when it comes to confidence, because confidence is one of the biggest things to having good aim and being consistent, and the other being trusting that you're going to hit your shot by shooting as soon as you flick to the target and not hesitating to make sure you're on the target before you shoot. Now, confidence is one thing, and I always recommend after every game, whether it went good or bad, take the time to play a deathmatch or go into the practice range to shoot around a little and get your shot back feeling good. Because going into a game, even with a tiny amount of uncertainty in your shot, is going to have huge effects on your confidence and can spiral you into an insane bottom frag. So it's always good to take a step back and reset yourself after games so you're starting back from the same point every time. But trusting your shot is a mechanic that we can all work on right now, and it comes down to incorporating click timing into your game. This is why a ton of people say tasks like Grid Shot from Aim Labs or Tile Frenzy from Kovacs don't really translate very well into the in-game scenario, because it's higher impact and those scenarios are mostly training you to trust your shot. But the in-game scenario has an entirely different dynamic. Whenever you're in Kovacs or Grid Shot, you really don't care about what's going on and you're not thinking. In-game, you're thinking about a ton of things and you can't focus on trusting your shot. So we need to work that mechanic into the game. And the entire goal here is to allow yourself to instantly react to the target popping up on your screen without thinking about it at all. And without hesitation, take your shots as soon as you finish the flick without worrying whether the shot is going to hit or not. And this is where those highlight reel flick one taps come from, where it seems like the person really didn't even mean to hit the shot. Like one of Hiko's many inhuman reaction clips that he's farmed up at this point. So to start training this mechanic, go into the practice range, set the bots to easy because you don't want the bots to artificially speed you up, you want to do that yourself. Start the scenario and completely clear your mind. Whenever the bot pops up in your field of view, don't even think about it, just snap to the bot's head and shoot as soon as you get there, whether you're on target or not. Don't try to be super snappy or fast, just make it a perfect movement that happens instantly when the bot pops up and you click when the crosshair gets exactly where you want it to go. And by doing this, over time you're going to slowly recalibrate your shot to get more and more accurate, and by doing that you're going to naturally start speeding up your flick and your shots little by little. Because realistically, you can hit any target that pops up on your screen. You've probably done it before, and if you've done it once, you can do it again. So trust your shot, because I see people way too often, even in my immortal games, flick to an enemy and be slightly off and completely freeze up without shooting a single shot, waiting on their brain to process how they should correct their crosshair. But trusting in your shot is going to get rid of that buffer time, and it's going to be the key to building that consistency that you need to incorporate into your aim. But speaking of consistency, that has to be the next tip, but not consistency in your aiming. That comes from mechanical practice. I'm talking about consistency in your routine. Now that doesn't mean your routine has to be the same thing every day. Actually, it's good to swap up your training routine a little bit every couple of days or weeks, so your body and brain constantly has to adapt to a new stimulus to actually improve. But you should consistently be putting in the effort every single day, and it doesn't have to be an 8-hour session. Actually, studies are showing more and more that you start capping out at how much you can improve at a skill movement at about 90 minutes of work in a short period of time, and you'll start seeing diminishing returns at about 45 to 60 minutes, which has shown time and time again that a 1-hour session every single day is way more effective than a single 7-hour session once a week in terms of improvement. Which is exactly why I recommend everyone come up with a 15 to 20 minute routine they like doing, because we all have days where sometimes we just can't sit down and play, or just don't feel like it for some reason. And that's where that 15-minute routine is going to shine for your improvement. When you're drinking your coffee and waking up in the morning, or just waking up to get ready for school, we all have time for a quick 15-minute routine sometime throughout the day. And that's one thing that separates the pros from the rest of the people. Even on their off days, you can bet that the pros are practicing something, because that consistency is just ingrained in their routine and their day just doesn't feel right without it. And if you want to take your game to the next level, that's the type of consistency you should be striving for. But with consistency and training in mind, it's the perfect time to talk about segmenting your training, because this is the one thing way too many people are skipping out on. Now, when it comes to hitting a shot in Valorant, there are a lot of moving parts in the equation. You have distance, movement speed, your movement speed, flicking your arm, flicking your wrist, tracking, recoil control, and a lot of times even more than that. And when you're always training all of those different parts at the same time, you're making the entire process way more efficient, but you're never actually making up for your weaknesses. Instead, you just learn to rely on the parts of the movement that you're strongest with, and you neglect the weaknesses because they don't offer the results you want. Think about recoil control as the easy example. A ton of people pick up the Vandal and constantly tab fire or fire in bursts, and over time it gets to where 90% or so of their kills are coming from that firing style. But they never take time to learn recoil control effectively because they're already getting kills, so when you get put in that spot spot when you desperately need to spray down, after that third bullet, you're really just crossing your fingers and hoping those bullets go to the right spot. Instead, what you should be doing is coming up with as big of a list as you can, breaking down your shot movement as much as possible, and practicing each of those movements one by one. Now, not only is this going to allow you to create new strengths and bring up old weaknesses, it's also going to point out new weaknesses that you didn't even know you had. Like by focusing purely on wrist flicks for a few minutes, you might start to realize that you're pretty bad at micro adjusting, and that's something you can now work on. And this shouldn't be the only way you're practicing, because putting the entire movement together is how you're going to play the game and should be the majority of your practice. But taking that step back and segmenting your training as much as possible is one of the best ways to break through plateaus whenever you're having them, and developing that insanely consistent aim that we're all looking for, because you need to develop those weaknesses. And finally, I want to talk about body positioning, because this is one thing that really only the top level of players focus on. But like we talked about before, everything needs to be the exact same every single time. That way you can be as consistent as possible every time you go to make a shot, and your body position is the exact same way. Now, everyone is different. If you have a body position that works for you, then feel free to stick with it, because if it works for you, then it's hard to make an argument against it. But keep in mind, it could be costing you when it comes to your aiming effectiveness. So if you haven't put much thought into it, I at least recommend that you try out a couple of different body positions, because you never know if something might work better. So let's start off with establishing a baseline for body position. Optimally, you want your back to be as close to upright as possible while still being comfortable for you. And this could be leaning a little bit backwards or leaning a little farther forward closer to your monitor. You also want your shoulders to be completely relaxed, and with your shoulders completely relaxed, your elbows should be just higher than the table, with as much forearm or wrist that you're comfortable with being on the table. And this is a completely neutral body position. Your elbow is tucked in somewhat close to your body, your elbow is also at a 90-degree angle, and your shoulders are completely relaxed, with your forearm and your hand being able to lay flat on the table pretty comfortably. And in theory, this is the best position for consistent foundation to build your aiming movements off of. But like I said, everyone is different, and there are a lot of people who do different things, like scooting in closer to their desk and sitting lower. That way they can flare their elbow out on the desk with a lower sensitivity and get a lot of arm movement out of it. And then there's other people who really like to exaggerate the upright close to their monitor posture, where they lean forward, put extra weight on their forearm, and they don't move their arm quite as much. But either way, my biggest recommendation would be to be mindful of your body position. Find what feels right for you and recreate that every time before you play. But as a general rule of thumb, I would try to avoid having your desk too high with an upright posture where you start to shrug your shoulder upwards, and the opposite of that where your desk is too low and you try to flare your elbow or lean back to compensate for it and create a shoulder dip instead. Both of these are body positions that should create inconsistent results in your performance, but as always, if it works for you, I guess it works for you. And as always, remember, if you want to improve, win more gunfights, and get the rank you've always wanted, then check out SkillCapped.com. Link is in the description below. And overall, do you have any aiming or training tips that worked for you? Let me know in the comments down below. And while you're down there, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn those notification bells on, because we here at SkillCapped have a ton more comprehensive premium guides coming your way that you're going to want to stay up to date with, so you can stay ahead of the pack. And as always, I want to thank you for spending this little bit of your day with us. And I'm Notorious Dub, signing off.